All right, so we will call today's committee of the whole meeting for Tuesday, April 19th, 2022 to order. And I would do that first by acknowledging that we're meeting on the lands of the Sauk and Chianu nations. So we'll just look to the committee for approval and report. We just need the one mover, got St. Pierre with the move, and all in favor. Carried. Perfect. So we will start with our delegation before we invite up the Sauk Homeless Coalition RV Working Group and presentation by Shadley Taylor and Richard Sawatsky. I'll just turn it over quickly to Councillor Bateman, who will introduce them.
Well, I just wanted to thank Council for agreeing to hear tonight's delegation at our meeting last week and engage in this conversation about barriers and possibilities in addressing one aspect of this very much wider, broader housing crisis. I just wanted to introduce our guests tonight. Shadley Taylor and Richard Sawatsky are members of the Sauk Homeless Coalition's Housing Working Group, which is one of the Housing Coalition's, Homeless Coalition's goals is to create a consistent, proactive, and growing supply of safe, appropriate, affordable, and barrier-free housing accessible to all people in need of support. So Ms. Taylor is a licensed practical nurse educator with a particular interest in and calling to assist homeless individuals and those at risk of homelessness. She worked with the PHS Community Services Society in Victoria, a Victoria-based nonprofit that provides housing, healthcare, harm reduction, and health promotion to vulnerable people in the region. And like Shadley, Richard Sawatsky has been a contributor to the development of the Homeless Coalition's 3-year strategic plan. He's an exemplar of the housing crisis itself. He's a provincial government employee who, because of soaring rental prices on the South Island, lives in his RV. He's founder and director of strategic development for Homes with a Heart Society. So, so following up on our discussion last week regarding the letter we'd received from Wanda Sanford and her problems, and the excellent reply sent by Sauk's Director of Planning. Our guests are here tonight to present one potential made in Sauk solution, which is classified in the draft Homelessness Coalition Strategic Plan as Housing Item 2.5, Emergency RV Homeowner Billeting Service. So over to you, Shadley and Richard.
So come on up and please make yourself comfortable at the mic there. Council, before we begin the presentation, we typically have a 5-minute allotment for our speakers. I've been made aware this presentation may go around the 10-minute mark. Are we comfortable doing that? We'll just need a motion and vote on the matter. St. Pierre.
Is to seek a temporary allowance to the Sauk building bylaw number 7888/2020 to allow for homeowners to provide housing spots for RV dwellers. And that would be, we'd hope to show you how I propose to make this a safe and secure and a stable and doable thing for Sauk to do. So if we go to the short-term, I think it's the next slide. Yeah. So it'd be a short-term emergency solution, starting with 10 to 20 residents, homeowners or landowners who would offer their driveway or space for RV parking with electricity, hookup, and water, and possible access to Wi-Fi. We started with suggested cost of $300 a month that would be paid to the homeowner. This would be a contract between the homeowner and the RV or van dweller. The BC Residential Tenancy Branch has agreement contracts that will allow for valid insurance for homeowners, RV land dwellers called primary dwelling or resident insurance. And we would try this for 2 years as an emergency measure solution. So it would be just a temporary solution to emergency problem that we have right now. So some of the obligations for the landowner or the RV dwellers would be, we would treat this like any other rental. So you would have a set of references, ask for ID, you'd meet with them first, you would have a valid signed RTB contract with them. So valid insurance, valid ID, we would have a list of set of amenities that were offered, expectations for usage, For example, if they have pets or no pets, or whether you would allow pets on your land or not. We could also have a neighborhood agreement. So a set of like rules that we would try to impose and that the RV dwellers would go by. This monthly contract would be suggested to be month to month, but a 90-day minimum to start with. So they would be more permanent dwellings that we could capture them in the system, perhaps offering them more support in their systems and get in more housing. So one of the, I think the next slide is next one over. The RTB rules are that in a mobile home park, there's two sets of rules that you can go by. You can have a manufactured home park tenancy regulation, or you could have residency agreement. So those are two sets of already in place rules that you could sign as a contract for these van dwellers to be under. One of them is that you could rent out your own RV on your property to somebody who needs housing, or you could have just the spot that you could rent out, and the people could park their own RV on there. This would probably involve a temporary use permit from the district, so that we could use these building matches. This is a safe, secure, fair, and doable undertaking that we were hoping to use as an emergency measure for 2 years. And Richard here would like to bring his own personal experience as well. And then I'll come back and talk about, take your questions. Okay, go ahead.
Right. So one of the things that I've noticed and have experienced while being dehoused is an incredible level of discrimination through, economic and just having people, forcing you to move along, honking their horns as they drive by you. It would be really nice to change the way that people treat our homeless in our society. Like there's not really any way of going from the sidewalk to a tent to an RV to a house, because the houses are just too expensive. So if we're able to figure out how we can take the 5,000 homes in Souk, double that, then we can actually have places to put people. Because right now there's nowhere for people to go. Like when I arrived in Souk in November, they gave me a tent and said, good luck. And I asked them where I should go. Well, there wasn't anywhere to go that wasn't private property. And I already know that, if you're in the wrong spot, people can knock on your window and move you along, and then you'll have to go. So that doesn't leave anybody, such as myself, who works from home, any place where there's actually anywhere to go. So since I've been living in both my SUV and my RV, one was an upgrade. I had a spot, which was then removed. I'm not sure why exactly, but it happened. Anyway, so I was then not having access to any fresh water, electricity, garbage, anything like that. So my proposal, which doesn't even really require any zoning changes, would be to get a dumpster and a Wi-Fi put in, just so that people can actually access it, so that we could have some temporary measure of having some sort of services and things like that. And I know a lot of this building program will be excellent for tiny homes and trailers and RVs and such, but there are a segment of the RV and car population that don't want to remain stationary. They actually want to remain mobile and go around, like all around the lower mainland and all over BC. So if that could be a change as well, because I know a lot of people actually have to budget parking tickets and law enforcement into their monthly budget so that they can actually sleep and enjoy their life. So if you have any questions, I'm available after she's done.
All right. Did you want to make any final comments?
So we can go take questions now, or we can go into a long-term solution as well. Wasn't sure how to handle that.
Yeah, no worries. So council, if you have questions, we can certainly pose them to the delegates and as well to staff. Made it well within your 10 minutes. Thank you. But yeah, I do have questions myself. I think we probably all do around the table. But the first thing that comes to mind really is that the plan that has been created here and presented today is a good strategy to use between the homeowner and the tenant. But what makes it temporary? How can the district enforce any measure of temporary is it just a temporary use permit that we're supposed to be making sure that every single agreement in our city has this temporary use permit? How does that kind of communication line happen between the tenant and the homeowner and the city? Because in typical rental agreements, obviously, we don't take part in that.
That's a good question. I suspect that there's probably 25 or more people that are already non-compliant with this and are doing this anyways. This would allow them to come into compliancy with a bylaw, a temporary bylaw measure. And I'm hoping that we could either appoint a task force or having somebody oversight to do the building matches to make sure that these people are in compliance with their insurance on their RVs. How homeowners would have their insurance intact. And I don't know if they need to show us their rental agreement. I haven't thought that far ahead. It's probably a good idea. So we can keep track of it and report back in 6 months. Did this work? What were the problems that we ran into? How can we fix this?
That sort of leads into my other question, really, which is when you speak of this being a temporary solution and perhaps running a pilot for 2 years, what's the exit strategy? How are you planning to have people housed? Or is that something that's going to be planned as you go? Or
Well, I'm hoping that as outreach workers are able to make more contact with these individuals, we can maybe get them into the BC Housing Registry. We can get them into housing more permanent and stable, the ones that want it. Also, they have better access to healthcare. A lot of seniors that are kind of falling through the cracks because they don't have a permanent address. It's hard to get a bank account to get one. So this may allow them to have a permanent address as well. I mean, we could have feedback in 6 months to say this worked really well, or these are some of the avenues that we need to improve on. It is fair to say that other cities have tried this in the States and it was very successful.
do they have built models that we could work with?
Yeah, one is called Safe Parking. And I think I've embedded the link in those handouts. And one is one is called Safe Parking, one's called Faith Parking, which is the churches in the area would donate 2 parking spots each, and it would be managed. So when police or somebody finds somebody not parked or compliant with the bylaws, they could offer them an immediate place to go park instead of giving them a ticket. And then once they're in that system, the church parking lot perhaps, then we can get them into billeting arrangements with the homeowners, or even, blue skying, we could get them housing or housed.
Thank you. And turn it over to councilors. Councilor Beddoes, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a number of questions. Now, I just want to get this clear. This plan is for somebody or people that are living out of their own vehicle that already have a vehicle. This isn't going scrounging around the city trying to find every unused or tent trailer and things like that and putting it up. So it is for people that are already established in a vehicle. So I have a number of concerns. One is you mentioned, people being upset, NIMBYs, as you call them, or whatever it is. And being involved with Sea Park, when we had the homeless in there, it was a very, very big problem with everybody. And they do have a very jaded view of who was there.
Mm-hmm.
As it turned out, it was so well managed and a great opportunity for some people to get things together. But it's still a very real thing, and it's what we will end up dealing with. If there's one on a street somewhere and 3 neighbors down the street get upset with it, they'll be on our doorstep in no time at all, asking for an enforcement. So that seems to be, I'm not saying no, I'm just trying to throw out some things here that you might have to have a look at. If we relax the zoning, we can't just relax it for 20 or 30 people. We'd have to relax the zoning across the board. We cannot show favoritism to any particular group. But those are things I would like staff to comment on it. But when it comes to, like say, like this vehicle here, it rolls into my driveway. And how would you handle the sewage and the power? My understanding is when you go to an RV park, for instance, they'll give you like 30 amp service, you 215 amp breakers, of which, you know, I don't know what's in these, depends on the unit, I guess. But my concern is that if you go up and plug into just somebody's normal outside outlet, which there's, you know, probably 4 or 6 of them all on one circuit, and you put a microwave on or a small heater or anything else, you're going to be blowing breakers, and it's dangerous. So I don't know who monitors that sort of thing when somebody offers their home up. Who checks to make sure that they have the proper hookup to accommodate this vehicle? You know, both in potable water. You say potable water is important, and it is important. It can't just be a garden hose. It has to be a special hose. Power is extremely concerning to me because I don't know, this unit, it looks fairly old, nice unit, but I don't know what the states of some of these things are. Are we putting up a fire hazard? And what is the district's liability with that by allowing this? So that is a concern of mine. That's a couple of off the top of my head. Sewage, power. So how has it worked for power? I mean, you obviously had some experience with this somewhere. Do you have to run an outlet, see, if I had in my house, I could run a 220 breaker out to the side, put an outlet in, run some sewage in and things like that. But it would cost me a good few $1,000s. So I just wonder how that worked.
So we thought about this when we were in discussion about it, and it's a valid question. That's why I kind of wanted the list of amenities that each person, because each landowner would have different things that they could offer. Some people maybe only can offer a patch of dirt that they could park on. That would be for 90 days. And some people would have actual hookups for RVs. So it would just be what's ever offered. It wouldn't be something the expectation would not be there for them to provide a full-on RV site unless they had that and wanted to.
Thank you, Councillor St. Pierre.
Just like to comment on Councillor Beto's question. And I think one of the concerns that, as I've expressed many times in council, is that we do have a large number of RVs that are not in compliance, that are potentially, you know, hooking up in ways that are not safe without appropriate disposal and so on and so forth. Ideally, something like this could actually allow us to have inspections and maybe see about bringing these things into a safer space. My concern is that we do not actually continue, if we don't actually do anything vaguely like this, the problem doesn't go away, it just waits to blow up in our faces. So I don't know how many solutions would be available right at this moment in time, but I would suggest that the problem already exists. It's just kind of waiting for us to find it and for it to go wrong. So I completely agree with Councillor Beto's concerns over a lot of these things, but I think that we need to do something ideally, and we could continue doing what we're doing, which is basically wait for complaints and avoid dealing with it. But I'd actually like to ask a question through the chair to staff, and that's really, is the temporary use permit actually an appropriate tool for potentially allowing a number or a large number of RVs to come into compliance so that we can inspect them, so that we can potentially charge fees in terms of, you know, something for the district for the services that people are using. Is there a better mechanism? Is this actually a good mechanism? Because I don't know about every single homeowner coming forward to get a temporary use permit. That sounds kind of crazy to me. And as far as I know, a temporary use permit has to come before council, or does it? So anyway, questions around that. Is that the right tool, or is it just, you know, are the right tools that could be recommended?
So the temporary use permit wouldn't be the one answer or solution to this issue. It certainly be one piece to address the land use component to uses that wouldn't necessarily be allowed on a property. That still doesn't address the matter of the necessary permitting for water and sewer and the like. So there's certainly building code issues that need to be addressed, in addition to the zoning pieces, where if we're saying we want to address the zoning piece through a temporary use permit, that only extends so far as recognizing that an RV currently within our zoning bylaw can be allowed within a seasonal RV park. It's not recognized like a manufactured home park. There's differences that. So there's a number of sections within our zoning bylaw that indicate what is a dwelling unit, which is something that provides for that long-term accommodation for somebody to have a habitable space to live in. Our definitions in the zoning bylaw look at having RV as that seasonal travel vacation accommodation that wouldn't necessarily provide for a longer stay form of housing. So therefore, we're not able to provide for the water, the plumbing and like I mentioned earlier about the building code processes. So there's still a number of other bylaws and provincial legislation that come into play here that the temporary use permit wouldn't just solve this. That also comes into play based on our temporary use permit requirements. The official community plan would also have to be amended because it doesn't recognize this type of residential use. Our temporary use permit section 6 of the official community plan have a number of considerations when a temporary use permit could be considered before council. This isn't currently listed as one of those provisions, so we'd also need to have an amendment to that bylaw as well. So as you can see, there are a number of matters that need to be addressed before we get to that stage of considering something like this. And I see the building code being one of those main pieces because people need those main services like water and sewer.
So it sounds like that might be a little bit onerous and there might be some other way of going about this. My next question would really be around how long can an RV be parked on someone's yard and used by anyone for that matter? Do we have bylaws that actually prevent someone from having a family member or anyone stay in an RV? And when does that time expire? My understanding is you cannot live year round. There's CSA considerations and safety considerations. But as far as I knew, and this is where I need your help, there was nothing to prevent someone from actually having an RV in their backyard and allowing a family member to stay in it. So is there a way around this particular issue simply by not by looking at a less than year period? We're looking at 2 years here, but what if we were looking at 6 months, for example?
I'm just looking at the definition of recreational vehicle in the zoning bylaw, and I think that might provide, without getting deeper into, I think we'd have to look at, like Director Palau said, there's multiple areas in the zoning bylaw that speak to this, but it does say that a recreational vehicle is primarily for accommodation during travel or recreation without continuous connection to sewer, water, or electric hookups. So it has that implication in there that it's temporary, but we would have to pull out other sections of the bylaw to answer that question fully.
So it sounds like we could sort some of this out by amending the definition.
I think that would be one of the areas we would have to look at. I think there would be multiple.
Thank you.
I think as well, and I don't know if that's true, but amending the definition isn't something we could just do as a single municipality. It would be like the federal and provincial governments also have definitions for certain types of dwellings. Staff may know a bit more about that, but I'll see if they do.
Certainly. So I think, again, the main piece is about that need for connection to services. So while we could amend the definition to say how long somebody might be remaining within a recreational vehicle, there's also those other service requirements. And as the definition states, it's that continuous connection. So how are we going to regulate? I mean, we can say if somebody's in a vehicle for X number of days, well, what are the service requirements? How are they addressing sewage and water and the like? I'd have to go through the rest of our bylaws to see if there are any other stipulations about habitation within a recreational vehicle on properties. Because typically the understanding is that you have the storage of those vehicles on your property, but we have specific recreational properties identified where RV units are used on a seasonal basis. And then after that period, usually the park is closed, and it's understood that there won't be people residing within those recreational vehicles over the longer period of time. It's the property manager's responsibility to comply with those business requirements.
Councillor Bateman.
Okay, thanks everyone for the comments so far. As I said at the outset, the point of tonight is as a conversation starter. And I'll just quote our housing minister, David Eby, who was quoted in the Tyee on Friday. And he says the issues that we are seeing right now, dramatically escalating rents, vacancy rates below 1%, people living in cars, people with jobs living in shelters, those issues are going to get worse unless we respond. So the good news, as Mr. Palau said in his response to Ms. Sanford, is that the province is indeed, and the federal government is looking at solutions for tiny homes and recreational vehicles in particular in the spectrum of affordable housing solutions. So I'm glad Shadley and Richard have come up with a brainstorm, an idea here that we as a district of Souk could explore further in an exercise to identify barriers, as Mr. Palau did in the report, the temporary use permit, we need a changed BC building code to be able to implement a series of other changes here at the local level. So my hope is that coming out of tonight, we would see some strategy to look at both this issue, this idea specifically, and then some larger. I think Shadley and Richard have talked about the need for a fully serviced RV park in Souk. There are some other solutions. Shadley, here's a question through me to you, through you to her, whichever. Could you speak to some of those longer term solutions that maybe could be moved on in time?
Sure, thank you. Obviously we talked about the faith-based parking, which is the 2 parking lots per a church that can be donated for immediate use. And then the long-term one would be an actual park that would have 3 acres. So 10 sites per an acre. So it'd be 30 sites, would have a hub for sewage hookups, recycling bins, like Richard brought out, lock storage, outdoor toilets, machine washer dryer hookup, maybe a community kitchen. There's lots of it's like was brought out. This would be easier if it was an actual RV site campground with amenities hooked up. The cost is fairly high for this. I priced it out in your package at probably 100,000 just to set up the basics, and that's gravel per a site, electricity amped in, and then just sewage. That would be it, and water obviously hook up as well, depending on where you are from and how far away you are from the site to pipe in. But yeah, that was one of the long-term solutions, the ideal one. The short would be the church parking lots, and then the short-term parking would be the building, and then eventually just get them housed and provide housing for them. But in the chances that we don't have that, let's have an RV park that they can park in long-term.
Thank you. I do see a couple of, for me, the safe parking, especially for nomadic use, makes sense. And I feel like that's something that is achievable if we have the right location and a bunch of ifs, but we can set up dumpster and access to services and all that, and Wi-Fi access. Those are some basics that we could definitely do. But the challenge for me is definitely, where do we go if the building code's not there to actually take it the step further? And on top of that, without a plan to actually get people housed, I know that's a huge challenge, and it's something that Councillor Bateman and the Sikh Homeless Coalition has been working on for a really long time and has done a good job with. But again, it's a big challenge in that part. That part's tough if we're planning on being temporary. I would almost feel more comfortable if we planned on being permanent, because it's not, this isn't a problem that's going to go away. There's always been people that are unhoused, and there always will be. So obviously right now we have a large number of people who are unhoused, and it's getting really scary. But I don't think for us to sit here and say this is temporary would be a bit naive. Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, I was just to staff, if for instance, somebody did donate or bought a couple acres of land and set up an RV park, that's possible in our municipality, is that correct? As long as it's done according to code.
That's correct. As long as they go through the proper channels to comply with our bylaws regarding zoning specifically. First, is that an allowable use within the zone that that they're intending to provide for that, and they have the necessary permits in place. But the other component to that is the seasonal aspect of it, right? As we understand it right now, the RV park is for that seasonal recreational use, and I believe the discussion is surrounding that more long-term aspect of having it beyond a certain period of a fixed time within a calendar year.
Reason I asked that question, because we heard that, you know, the province is very concerned about it. And as you know, this housing is more of a provincial jurisdiction. And I know it affects us all, but they have the dollars. We don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars that kick to the problem. And you know, if they would, as they did with other areas, they have temporary housing that they put up under emergency. If they did something like that, we still wouldn't be out of the in the clear with it because of the definition of an RV park. But I just I look at this and I thought the only answer that I see here is something like an RV park, because I'd be loath to see this vehicles parked in people's driveways with extension cords and pipes rolling around over, and our building people having to go over and police this to make sure that they're all hooked up right. That is a nightmare I don't want to see the district get involved in. But I still, you know, a heartfelt concern. You know, there might be a solution, and I don't have a problem with, you know, if there was a working group to look at some of those things, fine. But it's an uphill battle, and I think, as Councilor Bateman said, that they're just trying to fathom a way ahead here. It's not a simple solution. The devil's in the details, and there's a lot of details in there that have to be worked out first. But you know, it's one of those ideas that come forth, and we have a look at it. Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Dana Lajeunesse.
Yeah, we've had a few examples of people with larger properties who've put in RV hookups and have attempted to do this and have been shut down by bylaw because they're kind of doing it under the radar. And if I can't imagine allowing this in all zones and all neighborhoods, I just think we already have issues with parking. People are complaining about having to park on the street. And so if we were to entertain such an idea, there would have to be a minimum parcel size so that you could maybe put 2 or 3 RV spots in, but it would have to be done according to code, and all the electrical and servicing requirements would have to be done properly. Yeah, it's not an easy solution. I mean, there's no simple solution to it. I don't know.
Councillor St. Pierre, then Bateman.
As it happens, I had an opportunity during our trip back from AVIC, after which I'd taken in the affordable housing workshop to discuss some of the results with Councillor Bateman. And one of the things that did come to mind was that we have a lot, one things that came up during this workshop was that a large number of Canadians are house rich and cash poor. They have a lot of house. Sometimes it's a problem of house size. So for example, we have a large number of people that cannot afford to actually get a different size house in Souk because simply the market isn't there. So there aren't like studio apartments for someone that is now single living in a huge house that once held an entire family. So they end up staying in a large house. It doesn't work for them very well, but they have no choice. And that's simply because we don't have enough options in our housing stock. And that was actually borne out by statistics. There was a site that they provided, communitydata.ca, to look for all this stuff. But basically, if Souk is following suit, and I don't doubt that in many ways it is, we probably have a large number of residents that have a lot of house, too much house, and very little money. And it seems to me we have two problems that could actually provide solutions back and forth, but it would require funding, ideally, as Councilor Beddoes has suggested, from the provincial government to help with developing a program, maybe something similar to the Tofino Housing Corporation, but basically something that would allow us to provide coordination so that seniors, because I identify seniors as the people most likely be in a situation of having this extra housing, who are potentially not going to be comfortable with being their own contractor or dealing with someone that they might have to evict. Having someone that does all that, a coordinating agency that could actually help collect money, do the work, and make sure that someone that's in an RV is actually situated in a coach house, in a renovated basement, in an actual conforming legal suite, which could then happen. I think that we could actually utilize housing agreements to basically maintain it as affordable housing while still increasing the cash flow for people that otherwise might not have any money. I would love to see a task force working on some of these things and potentially going to our MLA who might have some clout and seeing whether or not we could actually do something similar. But I think that even encouraging people to try and come into compliance, so we can actually get inspectors to look at the situation as it stands, would be useful to prevent something bad from happening.
Go ahead, Councillor Bateman.
Okay, second time speaker, so I better make it good here. Are you laissez-faire tonight? Okay, good. Yeah, thank you, Councillor St. Pierre. It's interesting. I was looking at the housing needs report today of 2019, and it claims there's only 280 secondary suites in Souk, which surprised me. Or I guess those are legal secondary suites. There could be some illegal ones as well. But one of the recommendations of the report is that there would be workshops offered to homeowners in Souk to, in fact, learn how to develop a secondary suite. And because, yeah, so yeah, I agree that this is a provincial matter. I'm wondering whether we as community of the whole could encourage Shadley and Richard to further develop this idea. We could then advocate with the province, and it could become part of the ongoing dialogue at that provincial level. Regarding this wide housing spectrum, here we are at this one very vulnerable end of it, because we have upper middle class folks who cannot afford a $1.3 million home, and yet we also have people in Richard's position who tonight will be getting in that vehicle and going someplace, and hopefully that knock on the window won't happen. It doesn't. Yeah, so I'm wondering, I'd first like to, through you, to Mr. McInnes, because Mr. McInnes participated in all three of the strategic planning sessions with the Housing Coalition. And you were at our table with Shadley and Richard on the third session. I'm curious your thoughts on this, sir.
My thoughts are fairly pragmatic. And I'll start with the fact that this is complex. This is not simple. This is not something that we'll take a half an hour and write a report to council on. This is not a strategic priority council in 2022, and it's certainly not in our 2022 work plans. So the very best that I can commit to is bringing back a report suggesting what resources we might need if council wants us to move this up as a strategy. And that would require additional resources or require us not doing something that's on the plan now and in our work plans now. I think it's laudable. I think it's the idea, and I'm sorry I had to leave for a bit. It sounds as though we've moved a little bit away from the billet program to other things. We're talking about suites and other things now. I think a pilot program for the billet program is something that we could advocate for. But again, to think that we would have something in place for this to be allowed in Suk within 30 days is not reasonable.
Thank you, Mr. McInnes. I do agree. I think advocacy is a really great position for us in this, and I know that's not really what you want to hear. It wouldn't be if I were in your shoes, but that I bet we are all willing and able to offer. But I think the biggest challenge is for the top down has to happen for us to really be able to action a lot of these in a meaningful way. I think that's where at least I'm stuck. Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, I have to concur. The only thing is that Councillor Bateman did make a nice suggestion there. I mean, to keep your group to keep working on the problem now that you hear some more hurdles that are in place, and maybe expanding some to bring a few more people in and flush it out a bit, because as our CAO said, it's a very complex issue. And so I think it's important that you keep working on it. It's amazing what if something does change from the higher ups, and that's where the big change would have to come. You hear the province saying that, then you might be a little bit closer ready to do something about it. I know it doesn't solve on people today, but we're going to have this problem next year as well. And probably even more so unless something happens with the housing market. It's only going to get worse. There's no doubt about it. So I'd encourage you to keep working on it. If I can be of any assistance in that, you know, I built my own home. I know how everything hooks up. I'd be more than happy to talk with you or meet with you, and when you need me.
Councillor St. Pierre?
Just following up on what Councillor Beddoes was saying, I tend to agree with everything that's been said. One thing I'm curious about is whether or not this is a place where, instead of putting staff hours into it, we could maybe dip into council contingency and potentially put some money forward so that possibly the Poverty Coalition or someone else could actually help with basically working on this, because it's easy to say, let's you know, have people who are not being paid try and, you know, produce some sort of report or keep moving forward. But quite frankly, a little bit of money really helps, and sometimes it's just a little bit of money. So I'm curious as to whether or not there would be an appetite on the part of council to potentially look at asking for maybe what's it, an RFP? No, not an RFP, the other way around. Basically some sort of proposal with a price tag on it in terms of what we'd like to see in a report, or some solutions, or something that we could put our teeth into, but not necessarily for free, because I think that's a little bit much to ask.
I think what we could suggest is that, I don't know, Ms. Temple, you may be able to answer, our grant application process is still open? No, that is closed.
It closed on March 15th.
Thank you. I am way behind the times. But yes, putting money towards a solution could be an option. I don't think it would be in our purview to put out any
Large dollars.
No, that's, sorry, not what I mean. I'm request and be the ones receiving responses and everything. I would personally not want us to have staff take that on. As we said, it's not a strategic priority. So putting that in the hands of staff would be jump in that queue.
So I think, yeah, thank you for these comments. You know, it's the Suk Homelessness Coalition that needs to take the lead in this, of course, and you two are a working group, and we don't have a budget. We have no funds at all. And yeah, I agree with Councillor St. Pierre. We cannot expect our two heroic volunteers here to continue without some respect. So we'll bring this up at the next Housing Coalition, housing, how do I call it that? Homeless Coalition meeting in early next month. I would hope that if the coalition agrees to pursue this further, we would be able to then come to the district and perhaps get a few hours of Mr. Palau's time to help shape a proposal, to certainly identify barriers and look at and flesh out this idea further into a more formalized document that we could then use in an advocacy capacity with the province. Because if this idea is to work as you mentioned, Shadley, it will require funding and a coordinator. You need someone in place to match make, to resolve disputes, to ensure that the power hookups are, it can't be our building department doing that work. It would need, anyway, these are all, I think it's a good start here. And I know, Richard, you know the urgency more than anyone in the room, of course. And I guess the good news is so does Mr. Eby. I believe you met with the Greater Victoria Coalition recently with is that the federal Minister of Housing?
I did, yes. Greater Victoria Homeless Coalition. Perfect, thank you. The Greater Victoria Homeless Coalition had a workshop with the federal NDP housing minister. And I got an opportunity to share with them some of the possible strategies that we've been working on as our team has basically pushed forward. And I've also met with the Hope Center, the shelter, to try to figure out some things that we could possibly do to help the people that are living in their cars, as well as the tents. And they've actually expressed to me some concerns about there not really being a pathway from the side of the road to the house. So one of the things that I asked them, and I didn't actually hear back today, I was expecting to hear, but did not, was some possible funding for me personally, which I could use as a rental subsidy, which I wouldn't use, of course. I would actually use it for Wi-Fi in a dumpster. And then I would actually ask the council here if there was an address that I could put it so that we can actually have people to use it. But the funding didn't go through, but I can definitely follow through if that's something that you would permit.
So you sought grant funding for a dumpster and a Wi-Fi connection?
Yes.
Is that right? Yes.
Yeah.
And you'd like the district to identify a spot to?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Well, so I think the Homeless Coalition, let's pull it back, take it into our closed circle again, and come up with, evolve the idea further, and see where we can go next. That seems the most politic way of moving forward at this point.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I say one more thing? I did
Through the
notice.
chair?
Sorry, can I? Okay. I did notice that Mr. Paulo said that in order to have continuous connection to septic and water, that's a violation of the building code for an RV. But my RV has a water tank as well as a black water and a gray water tank. It does not require continuous connection to anything. So all I would need to do is go and figure out how to get more water and how to empty the tanks when they're full. So it doesn't need continuous connection. That's all.
Thanks for clarifying that. And I think that's the piece where I'm a bit more comfortable with that nomadic, because then the location is temporary. At least it can be temporary. But then the situated RVs that are not moving and that are staying year round, that's where it really definitely gets into a challenge with potable water, et cetera. So thanks for clarifying that and also for sharing your experience. Much appreciated. Council, do you have any further questions or comments for the presenters or for staff?
I'd just like to move to proceed Thanks for the presentation. Want to hear from you?
So Councillor Beddoes has moved to receive, and we don't need a seconder because we're in committee of the whole. So all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. And Councillor Bateman, I'm sure that that will come up at the next homeless coalition. I was just about said the same as you did before. The homeless coalition. Yeah, because I feel like it is just, it's a challenge that we are definitely not alone in this world. We have to remember this isn't a Sikh issue, but it is an issue in Sikh. So it's good that we have people working on it, and hopefully pieces will start to come together sooner rather than later, and some tangible action items can come through. Great, thank you for that. We'll move on to our reports. We have item 5.1, which is paid on call recruitment and retention, and I'll send that over to staff.
Good evening, Chair and Council. So tonight before you is a recommendation that Council accepts this report as information and directs staff to approve the Sikh Firefighters Association member retention program, and that staff review the program after a 2-year trial period. So tonight I've got with me in the audience, if you will, Paul Sutherland. He's the paid on call president for the association there. So my hope is that once we go through this information, and there's a lot of it here, and hopefully you've had some time to review the reports and all the attachments. It's quite a bit of information to digest. I know you're familiar with some of it, so I'll try and talk to the things that are specific, and then we can go from there. And if there's any clarification needed, I'll probably rely on Mr. Sutherland, okay? Okay, so the topic here obviously is recruitment and retention. And as you know, Sikh isn't unique in this regard. This happens all across Canada, especially with the paid on call ranks. It's difficult to try and get people to dedicate their time and offer the commitment that we're looking for to be able to provide reasonable and safe and competent responses in this service. It's a work in progress, and it's something we always have to move forward and strategically think through. We're recruiting most of the year, and then we follow through with our training and then bringing these people into the fold. The challenges we face are family commitments for these folks, other jobs, obviously, and just time and dedication. And it's not like it used to be a number of years ago when I first got into this service. It was a little bit different and not quite as stringent and as demanding. So, you know, we do thank them for their commitment and dedication. Previous council action, I'm advised that Mr. Sutherland and the interim fire chief at that point in time met with you folks at an in-camera meeting to discuss some things moving forward. If I get into my report, some of the things that have taken place prior to me coming here, and then I'll speak to some of the things we've done now that I've landed here. There was new remuneration rates for paid on call staff. This policy was adopted on May 22nd, 2019. That's attachment 2 of this report. However, the challenge was that the complete implementation did not occur. So when I arrived, I had some outstanding work to try and finish. The challenge for me was getting my head around this model, first of all, and understanding relationships and what was lacking and how we needed to move forward. So I worked with Mr. McInnes and Mr. Sutherland, and we decided to start making a concerted effort and meeting some of these obligations and, you know, fostering that relationship, if you will. So what do I got here? So one of the goals was to revisit the retention program. Now that we sort of established a pay rate for a remuneration program, the next goal was to look at the retention program and to gain a better understanding of it and see where we could reduce costs moving forward. Attached to this document is a proposal that's been received from the Sikh Firefighters Association. It's attachment number 4, and it clearly shows that the work that I've done with Mr. McInnes and Mr. Sutherland, that we have reduced the stipend, as they termed it, with the goal of supporting our team and their families. The policy addresses specific support to the paid on call staff, as well as their families, with an overall focus on wellness and retention. So to sort of go backwards a little bit, historically, the Sikh Firefighters Association received what we term as a stipend. that totaled $37,799 annually. This was provided to the association in 2 installments, one at the beginning of the year and one at the end of the year. The money was managed by the association and used for all things related to their role in the district as well as the association business. After a close review of the items, it was believed that the district, through the revised paid on-call remuneration policy, was providing significant support to our members and that we could effectively reduce that stipend. These savings can be recognized through the reduction of operating and maintenance costs for the Firefighter Lounge. This space that I'm speaking of has served the association and the district for many years and is space that honors and speaks to the significance of this group in our community. A lease was put in place a number of years ago and it's currently expired. And after lengthy discussion, the association would like to place the responsibility of the lounge in the hands of the district. One of the key things moving this piece forward is that the lounge remains in its current firefighter theme, and members would have priority for bookings and social functions, with a standing booking every 3rd Thursday of the month for the Firefighters Association meeting. I have to advise you, the number that I had in this report is incorrect. I said that there would be a savings of $22,397. That is incorrect due to the fact that coming here sort of late in the game and after budget preparations, I was basing my math on a previous stipend number of 37779. Moving forward to the budget for 2022, that line item was reduced to $30,000. So that changes our reduction a little bit to the tune of $14,598 versus the $22,397 that I'd previously spoken about. In conclusion, I believe we've made significant progress with the recruitment and retention program and are well on our way to creating a program that provides ongoing support to our paid on-call team. Options in regards to this recommendation are: 1, direct staff to approve the Sikh Firefighters Association retention program with a review to take place after a 2-year trial period. Or number 2, direct staff to continue working with the Sikh Firefighters Association to provide counsel with other options. Staff is recommending option 1. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I know I went through that rather quickly, but like I said, the attachments speak to all the work that's happened since my arrival here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chief. Council, over to you for any questions. Councillor Beddoes.
I have a number of them. We'll start with you're going to reduce the stipend, as you call it, to $15,402. Do you have any details of what that is? Do we get any other group we give money to, they give us a budget back of what they spend that money on? Did I miss that in here, or is it in here?
Yes, through your chair to Councillor Beddoes, it is in that document, the proposal that was provided to us from the Sikh Firefighters Association.
I must have missed it, sorry. Whereabouts is it?
So
what page number? I got to here. I looked through this, I didn't see it, but then again, what to do.
Previous to me doing this report, if I may, Chair, Mr. McInnes and myself sat with Mr. Sutherland and we reviewed all the things that was being allocated from that money. And that's where we sort of started to make some reductions. And it really come down to how we provide support for the families in regards to wellness and making sure that we value the true dedication and commitment that they offer when they sign up for paid on call. So a lot of it has to do with the wellness side of things. And I could probably have Mr. Sutherland speak to the details if you would like.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind a few details because I still can't find that. If it's 17, okay.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And Mr. Sutherland, would you like to come up and speak to that? Thanks for coming tonight.
Page 17.
Your chair, it's in section 3 of the proposal.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chair. So Councillor, I just want to clarify, are you looking for the what's left or what was reduced?
No, you're asking right now, it's going to reduce to 15,402. what do you do with that money? That's-
Okay, so I guess just to step back on that, this goes back to 1960 odd when this agreement was made somewhere verbally. So this is the first attempt to writing something down to have an agreement between council and the paid on call or volunteer firefighters back then. So this all came about from, as we've already mentioned, the initial 37 and change, which was unaccountable and was requested, basically providing more accountability to the association. So we've taken that on. We've come up now with the discussions with the chief and the CAO about being more accountable for this. So with the reductions, you can see that we've broken it down into a base funding, which is what I call our operating costs, which is our pure operating costs, which before used to be things like liability insurance, sports rentals, lounge, Wi-Fi, cable, telephone, those hard costs that we just got monthly bills for that we ended up paying for. So we would budget that out of that original stipend. And then now with the lounge gone, so that removed a lot of that, a big chunk of that portion of that money. So our base funding now is basically broken down into our sports side. So the wellness and being of our personnel and their families. So right now, for example, liability insurance for using EMCS to play sports. So we play once a week, we play floor hockey. That's the sport of choice within the association. We have to pay for that. We pay rental fees for EMCS, and this year they tacked on liability insurance, which was new to us. So that's the base bulk of the base funding. So that's where that is. So that's a bill that we just get. The per member funding, which you can see there is 303, which gives us basically based on the members, which is what I like to call the individual per member budget, which brings us up to the 15,402. So most of that is to do with, again, recognition of membership. So honorary members, the cost of having honorary members, certain things like, let me see here, certain items such as we recently had like an Easter party for the children, for the families. So it's bringing back that family gathering and bringing back the families together where we haven't done this for the last 2 years during COVID. So the health and wellness, the recognition, a lot of it is now the recognition of membership. So within our own bylaws, we have our own bylaws. With our own bylaws, we have membership recognition for our own membership. So at 1, 2, 2, 5, and 10 years, we recognize memberships with presentations to support them, to try and bring in, it's all about, we call it retention, but it's about just bringing that family orientation and family values back onto the people and the association. So that's the bulk of this. The other thing that's different about this that we've agreed to is that now we are providing the chief, because obviously it's the same budget, we're providing that chief with a semi-annual budget report. So just last month was our AGM. This month, we're having our meeting this Thursday, and I expect my committees, the committees that are listed there, the ones that require a budget, they present it to the membership, we vote on the budget. So it's very, this isn't just, we just take all the money. So we go through this in a proper committee fashion. We vote on those budgets, we move on those, and then we expect the committee members led by the chairmen of each of those committees to work within their budget. That's where that all kind of comes through, and we've reduced it significantly, almost over 50% now, and become more accountable for that. So I think those are the big steps. The fact that we're going to do it at over 2 years is a fact that sign that we're going to provide, like I said, budget clarification, accountability, and we're going to see if this is actually, does this work with a bigger picture. So this is only part and parcel with the paid on call. This is part of that phase 3 orientation. It's the paid on call remuneration. It's a bigger picture. Is it the answer? I don't know. So I think I have to work with the chief on looking at, is this part of that retention, recruitment, and putting this together, and what makes people stay within Sikh Fire from a paid on call perspective, not career staff, obviously. So that's kind of the breakdown I get for what that is. I don't have the immediate breakdown in front of me right now, but that's where we got the numbers from discussion with the CAO and the chief.
Thank you.
Can I carry on? Yeah, sorry. Through the chair. Does your association on pay, they're not volunteers anymore. It's they're paid on call. Do they pay union dues? Do they association dues to cover some of these things, or?
So previous to this agreement, no. Yes, we do, because we're society. We have paid $1 annual fees just to be a member of the association, but we do not pay fees at this time. With discussion with the chief on reduction, looking further along in 2 years, the concept of some sort of association fees and supporting, becoming more self-sufficient. I've already introduced that to the association, and that we just don't have numbers yet. There's a discussion about it, and I suspect within this year, we'll have some sort of more self-sustaining membership fee that we will charge each member right now, but we don't have that.
So
We don't have that in place.
It's a work in progress, as they say.
It's a work in progress, but I didn't get a lot of pushback when I introduced it, because that's the reality of being more self-accountable and obviously tighter budgets. So we all understand it, and that's how we got
Okay.
halfway through.
I'm
So
pretty happy with
we're
what
getting
you're saying to me is, you're aware that, now, of course, guys that on call are getting paid, and, you have to shoulder some of the responsibility too. Recruitment, when we first dealt with this 3 years ago, it was a recruiting tool. And the last time we had a report that it was not working very well as a recruiting tool. Is that still the case?
I cannot comment directly on recruitment. That is not my swim lane, so to speak. I would have to ask the chief about recruitment. I'm batting that back over, but the recruitment part is not really the association's line, because
Just asking the wrong person.
everybody's-
I understand.
Yeah, and I think
appreciate your position.
my opinion on it as from a president and discussing with the association is it's still a work in progress. Like we discussed earlier with the interim chief, is that the actual paid on call, that all those phases didn't get implemented in accordance with the original plan, but now they are. And the big so what is, so what? And this is why I think in 2 years after this agreement and then recruitment, a review of the whole program might be in order to look at, are we getting, are you, or is the department and the.
Exactly.
Exactly. And I think that's a very interesting topic, but I can't answer specifically to recruitment. Sorry.
Okay, well, I appreciate what you have said to me. It's clarified a number of things. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Did you want the chief to respond at all to that, Councillor Beddoes? We could.
I don't know, Chief, would you like to
Pass it
respond to
on.
that through the chair to the chief?
Just wondering if your question's been answered, but
Nothing
we
like
can,
putting a new chief on the spot.
we can put him on the spot for that. Go ahead.
Through your chair to Councillor Beddoes, that's a great question. Again, I'm just sort of unpeeling the onion, if you will, and we're starting to make some progress and some headway. And I think it's a great group of people, and we all have the same, I guess, like-mindedness, and it's about public service and doing our job to the best of our ability. Having said all that, we've got 5 folks that are in the wings, and they'll probably be starting to ride the trucks within the next month or so, once they graduate from their recruit program. I'm doing some work right now with our recruitment officer in regards to what this looks like moving forward and how we target our Station 2 area. Looking at options, looking at social media, trying to understand how we can get some more people. Like I said at the onset of this, it's challenging at best. It's something that we continue to do. We take on 5 or 6, and then over the course of a calendar year, we'll lose 5 or 6. So we're back to square one. I'm hopeful that with this new model, and obviously there's been a change in leadership, as you're aware, and I think relationships are getting stronger and better. And I think we can achieve good things together, but it will take some time.
So if I'm still here this time next year, I can ask that question again.
That would be fair, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, we'll wait for COVID to settle down a bit more to get some better data on that. Go ahead, Councillor St. Pierre.
What do I call you? Is it Officer Sutherland or Paul? Paul's good. Sorry, just, you got a uniform on.
I answered to Paul.
You got a uniform. I don't know. All right. Paul, I have a question that it's directly about the paid on call and the retention.
Okay.
So right now we've got some good work that's happened in terms of the retention program, in terms of basically focusing on wellness. And I love what was being said about that. I was looking at this moving forward, not the district's population, whatever, but The focus is providing support to members and families through other avenues with a focus on overall wellness along with retention. So I think that's something that's I consider critical. I think you probably do too.
Mhm.
I know that there were questions, and I think that again, Councillor Beto seems to be preceding me in a lot of stuff. It's interesting about whether or not the paid on call was actually proving itself out in terms of retention, whether or not that was actually a good tool for retention. I was wondering if there was any work that was done with the membership to ask, and looking at the budget for paid on call, whether or not there'll be more interest in other services or benefits rather than the paid on call. Because I can't know this for sure, but I look at this and I think that's still a tiny amount of money for all the time and effort that people are putting in. And in terms of retention, I don't see why that would make any difference whatsoever, at least to me, if I was in that position. But I do think that other services, like for example, you're talking about events for families, things like a pass to Sea Park, things like the big one would be medical benefits or dental benefits if you don't happen to have medical benefits. I mean, if you've got a family, dental benefits are huge. In terms of retention, I think that if I knew that I could maintain dental benefits by actually being a volunteer firefighter, my kids could have braces and so on and so forth, I'd never leave. I think you'd find fewer people going away. Is there any option to actually go to your membership and ask whether they'd rather see that money, or see if there's enough money anyway to do that kind of thing? I don't know. To see whether or not there'd be an appetite for other benefits, other things that they would be more interested in than, honestly, an amount of money that's not going to pay a mortgage these days, not going to pay the rent. It's a nice thank you, but that's all it is. Is there something to be more meaty that the membership would like that we could actually really get behind?
Council, that's an excellent idea. That's thinking outside the box. This proposal was more to do just answering the part about the transparency and the accountability for the money that was perceived prior to, since 1965, which we hadn't. So I think we're in the infancy steps of this. This proposal is to move that forward. And I think in discussion with the chief and CAO, or through the chief, I think that those kind of discussions are what would be the next level of opportunities and maybe ideas. So am I fully opposed, knowing my association? If I came to them and said, look, instead of this money, we have other benefits, which I don't have any idea of what that costs. And I imagine it's not cheap. But those things, would that help in retention? Personally, as a parent and all that, I think I would be on board with that, but I don't know what cost that is to the association, the fire department, or ultimately the council and the district of Sauk. So I think that would be any of those decisions or discussions within this 2-year window, which is an agreement within this 2 years. Is that what we worked with? I work with the chief and the membership to pull those ideas, get some sort of special committees together within our own association and come up with these ideas, such as like you're saying, those benefits that aren't accounted for. And I don't know if that's within other paid on call departments, even those are options. So those are all, I mean, thank you. I've written those down. But I think those are in further discussions, probably within this 2 years. And then maybe after 2 years in review, this is some of the options we come up with, looking specifically at retention. And that obviously would play into recruitment as well, because I think that would be a good recruiting tool too. But then, at the end of the day, it all costs something. So. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, does look like we're heading towards option 1, council. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, thanks for this report, Chief, and you, Paul. I'm curious through you to Ms. Gray. In the financial plan, I went looking for a line item for the Sauk Firefighters Association, but there is not. Instead, there's paid on-call firefighters. So that includes the compensation program, the retention program, and $3,000 for recruitment. Is there a reason the association isn't cited by name in the plan?
Yes, through your worship, or whatever their terminology is. Sorry, apologies.
It's habit. It's okay.
The conversation last meeting. Apologies, through your worship, deputy worship. It is called the Volunteer Association payment. I believe it was maybe renamed. Sorry, I'm just trying to look at the, it should be the Volunteer Association payment, and the budget was $30,000 this year. I think it was, sorry, yeah, it's definitely, it's $30,000. It should be in there. I can just.
So it's not a big deal. I'm just raising that. My next question would relate to district, the district taking over management of the Firefighters Lounge. Will the 15,000 approximately be sufficient in the new scenario, or will you need to budget for additional funds?
The costs to maintain and operate the lounge will now become part of the fire department budget. So there may be some opportunity for us to recover some of the costs if we want to allow other groups to come and use that space. But that's a piece of work that we need to still get our heads around, because we may have to have a staff person here, or access and egress, and all of those types of things. So it's not something that we're prepared to bring forward any proposal or policy on tonight, other than the association now will not have primary responsibility for that space.
All right, and yeah, I think that's good enough. Thank you. Thank you.
Great, Councillor Lajeunesse or anyone else?
No, I guess, I think looking into Councillor St. Pierre's proposal of looking at providing benefits as opposed to, or in addition to, the stipend that the paid on call members get would be something worth looking into. And perhaps Ms. Gray would have an answer as to what the cost of that would be.
Apologies, sorry, can you repeat the question?
What would the cost of providing benefits to members be?
And I'll put that through to Mr. McInnes. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to make council aware of some of the nuances of where we're at and where we're going. One of the issues that we need to make sure that we keep in focus is the paid on call payment now is based on training and response. And we really need to be laser focused on making sure that all of these efforts translate into response actions from our paid on call members. So going to a fixed rate where there's a benefit without that requirement to respond may be something that is short-sighted in our view. So
Thank you. All right, we do have a motion here, which it seems like we're on the right track for, if I'm looking around, which is, and I believe we can do these all at once, that the Committee of the Whole recommends Council accept this report for information, that the Committee of the Whole recommends Council direct staff to approve the Sikh Firefighters Association member retention program, and that the Committee of the Whole recommends Council direct staff to review the program after a 2-year trial period. Moved by Councillor Bateman, no seconder needed. Any discussion on the motion? It's been had. All right, all those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Yeah. And thank you, Chief, as well. All right, moving right along to item 6. Any new business? I don't see any.
Can I make a report on my tree plant?
On your social media, you may. And we'll move to item 7, adjournment. We just need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Great. All in favor? Have a great evening.